Welcome back to the bench. My name is Paul, and this is the third video in the series of building my Serbian Police BRDM-2. I've primed the model black since the end of last episode, but today it's finally time to get some real paint on this thing. I wasted no time getting started. I loaded some white into the airbrush and quickly pre-shaded the whole model. I focused my paint on horizontal surfaces and the upper part of vertical ones to create a sort of zenithal shading effect. I don't have to be too neat here, there are still so many layers of paint and effects to come, but this step takes a little while to build up opacity and set up the model for the next layers. After this I mixed some flow improver and blue acrylic into the airbrush and gave the whole model a coat. Admittedly, it covered much better than I expected and it covered up a lot of the work we'd just done, but I've no doubt that the white allowed the blue to be more saturated than it would have been over pure black, so no complaints there. I simply put a drop of white into what was left in the airbrush cup and I did another pass of highlights with the lightened blue. In places, I used a piece of paper as a rough mask to accentuate the change between panels. I'm depicting this vehicle near the end of its service life, so this highlight step is a simple way to depict paint that has faded after years in the sun. Once I'd given the model a pass of highlights, I grabbed a piece of sponge and used what was left of my highlight colour to create a chipping effect around areas that might see scuffing or wear, just to reduce the waste paint. Then onto the star of the show, my sheet of star decals that had inspired this build as soon as I saw them. There are actually 7 different schemes on the sheet, so I began to cut out the relevant items, dropped them into the water, and prepared the surface of the model with microset while I waited for the decal to be ready. After that, I slid them onto the model, or more accurately my thumb, and then the model, and then I adjusted their position until I was happy. Once I was happy, I dabbed them with a piece of tissue paper to get rid of the extra moisture and lock them in place. As you can see here, the instruction sheet only shows one side of the vehicle, which I realised was an issue when I looked at the reverse side of the vehicle to realise that it wasn't a mirrored layout. I grabbed the big red 5 that's meant to be placed somewhere here, and I checked potential locations while it was still on the paper. After that I repeated the earlier steps and slid it into place on each side. The decals are nice and thin, and the surfaces they're going onto are nice and flat, so no issues so far. I applied micro sol on my work so far to soften the decals even further and help them to conform even more. I did this by grabbing an old stiff brush and crushing them flat using a stippling motion. I cut out the final decals, the large white text for the back and sides, and started getting them ready. That's when I noticed that the sheet provides an extra red 5, so I checked out a few places I could use it, but eventually decided to leave it off. I'm sure it'll find a home on a future project. I used one of the 2 provided police decals on the back plate and kept the other as a spare. I'm not sure what went wrong here, but after following the exact same steps as before, these transfers ripped on both sides. Regardless, I just applied the pieces and adjusted them once they were roughly in place. I guess that's the double-edged sword of this thin carrier film. It's easier to conform and hide, but clearly more fragile as well. After these were in place, I once again applied microset, microsol, and then left them aside to dry. Once they'd had some time to set up, I grabbed the airbrush and sprayed the wheel wells and wheels in a military green colour. You can see the wheels are green in reference pictures, but I also chose to make the wheel wells green in order to hint at the previous military life that this vehicle served, even though I think this is a detail that will be easily missed when it's all put together. I previously left the small middle wheels aside in sub-assemblies. There's no way to keep the tyres separate during the painting otherwise. After this green coat, I gave the chains a coat of silver paint and then finally put them together. At this point I sprayed varnish all over the vehicle to seal in the paintwork and decals so far. I always see this step as a bit of a checkpoint. Still, there was a few bits to do before I could start weathering. I grabbed a black paint and filled in the vision ports on the side of the hull, the pioneering tools and the guns and the turret. The latter items there will be getting grey and metallic coats, so this is an insurance to make sure if I miss those areas later they won't show through as blue. The centre parts of the wheels are also black in my references, so carefully I painted them as such, being careful not to hit the green rings too much. Before weathering, I wanted to get the transparent parts in place. So first I grabbed my chrome marker and I used it to ping the searchlight into next week. It was happy with its new home inside the cabin, but eventually I recovered it and I painted the other lights with the chrome paint. These markers are a real game changer for parts like this. They're super effective and really easy to use. With the searchlight back in place, I grabbed some Evo stick wood glue and stuck the clear parts into place. Unlike plastic cement or super glue, this will not fog up these clear parts, but I have found that it has a bit more grab than standard PVAs. I decided to be a bit of a rebel for this next stage. I grabbed AK's dark brown enamel wash for green vehicles and used it on my blue vehicle. I used it sparingly around the raised details all over the surface of the model. It really helps them to jump out and adds a layer of definition. Any overspill was cleaned up with white spirits, which can also be used to create a nice smooth blend and provide a kind of ambient occlusion look, like below the vision ports on the front. Once again, my electric blue paint was mixed with white and applied with a sponge on areas which are liable to be damaged. This serves a similar function to a dry brush coat, adding a layer of highlights. This wombo combo of wash and highlight is about the oldest model painting technique out there, but still just as effective as ever. While the paint was still out, I grabbed a fine brush and highlighted some of the edges and picked out some of the details like tool clamps and grab handles which had been darkened a bit too much by the enamel wash. This step is also useful for creating more intentional surface level or paintwork scratches and cleaning up some of the sponge chipping which can sometimes look a bit too random. I recreated the chip paint on the inside of the hatches using the same green as before. This can be observed on the reference pictures and helps to break up the blue. Having the hatches open like this really shows why they were green when everything around them on the inside is white. These hatches are pretty big and it would be a terrible idea to silhouette your crew against a white background anytime they open them up in the field. Granted, this is less of a concern for a police vehicle, and so they got the same coat of the same blue as everything else when it started its police life. After they were painted up, I painted the windscreen wipers and put them into place. The sponge was beginning to feel a bit like a crutch at this stage, but I pulled it out one last time with a dark brown paint and used it to create some rust chips. I focused on the exhausts first. These are often super rusted out on military vehicles historically, and then I followed a similar pattern to the previous chipping, just more sparingly this time around. The main areas I wanted to show rust on were around the bottom of the vehicle, the front armour plates, the grab handles and around the hatches. These are all visibly rusted on my reference picture, so they were the obvious choice. Like I've said previously, I wanted to pick a vehicle that's at the end of its life, but I didn't want it to look as though it's been abandoned, so I tried hard to show some restraint here. After that I grabbed a yellow ochre, burnt umber and black oil paints, and I put them on a piece of cardboard to bleed them with some of their oil, which makes them slightly less greasy. I set them aside to do their magic, and in the meantime I used a gunmetal paint to highlight the weapons and the shovel, and I used a grey paint to highlight the other tools and the tow cable. Once the oils had had some time to soak into the cardboard, I thinned them down and applied them anywhere there were brown chips on the model. After some blending, they make a convincing rust effect, which makes it look like the rust is bleeding out and affecting the paintwork, or as if water has been sitting on the surface of the vehicle, like in the nooks and crannies of the engine deck. This is a super rewarding step. The results are immediate and you get to turn lots of scattered brown dots into a cohesive wear and tear effect. On a matte surface like this, the oil paints really like to cling on, so I was restrained with how much I applied. Less is more. One technique I found myself using was to hold my paintbrush really far back and to let the natural shake in my hands create a random texture or pattern on the surface. Throughout this process, I mixed and matched the ratio of ochre and burnt sienna to create even more natural variations in tone and in colour. After rust came dust, so I sprayed a layer of hairspray over the model so that I can create the effect of disturbed dried dust. This had the added bonus of perfuming my whole desk. I grabbed a dust buff color and added it in vertical streaks starting from the bottom of the vehicle moving upwards. I also added a dust layer to all of the wheels, which I partially rubbed off so it settled into a lot of the crevices and details. I set it aside for a few minutes and then came back with a paintbrush wet with water to reactivate the layer of hairspray and break up the dust layer. I also used a large rectangular brush at this stage to create streaking effects with some of the dust layer which was still on the surface. Using an AK terrain paste with some extra bits of leaf and branch scatter, I created the effect of a layer of mud in the wheel wells and on the very bottom of the armour. I plan to make a small scenic base for this model, so this step will help to tie this vehicle into its environment. I made sure to blend out the mud effects with water, which makes a nice transition from our dried mud dust effects with this new layer of fresher dirt. Once the terrain paste was dried, I grabbed an enamel dust effect and spattered it on top of all the work we've done so far. This helps to tie everything together and any stray splats can just be cleaned up with white spirits. A nice canvas for this was the plate at the very front of the vehicle. At first I thought this was something like a sand ladder, like a board you can use to get unstuck from sand or mud. In reality it's actually a kind of float, and it helps with weight distribution when this thing is in swim mode. I used the same enamel wash on the wheels to keep things consistent, then busted the oils back out for some final grime and streaking. With this done, I think it was time to set the model aside for now and start thinking about our base. Thank you so much for watching yet another video in this short little series we have going here. If you've not seen the previous videos, we built the kit in the first one and painted the interior in the second, so I recommend watching them to catch up to speed. In any case, let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.